Birthplace of three religions, an extremely contested land, a lifetime's worth of history, and no struggle to stay afloat on this episode because you're at the Dead Sea.
Welcome to Israel.
We're the travel agents coming to you with tips, tricks, interviews, and voyages by cruise. The travel agents bringing you the latest travel news.
Hello, I'm Brian.
And I'm Will.
We're your hosts for the Travel Agents podcast. Today we're talking about Israel.
Oh yeah, the Holy Land.
We're heading over to the Middle East to a very small land.
So tiny.
It's equivalent to the size of New Jersey.
It doesn't feel like it though.
No, there's just so much to see and do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of moving around because you want to see it all.
Yeah.
So it feels like you're moving a lot and seeing a lot. So there's plenty there. Population about 9 million. And in 2019, Israel had 4.5 million tourists. That's half their population. And that number is growing. I was tracking it from 2015 and up.
Yeah.
And it seems like a ton, but we were just talking before we started recording, Will, that like France and Italy have somewhere between 50, 60, 70 million tourists a year.
That tracks.
So 4.5 million in comparison to that doesn't seem like that much, but you have to understand the size of it to appreciate it.
Are there 4.5 million people going to New Jersey every year? I doubt it.
With those new mega cruise ships sailing out of there, maybe.
Maybe.
That's a little different. Trying to explain the districts, territories, and land masses of this country is going to be difficult and laced with disagreements from you listeners. So a quick note about politics and land for anyone listening. Let's just get this out of the way. This is not going to be a political episode on Israel. If you came here to learn about disputed land and territories and history, this is not an episode for you.
Exactly.
I'm sure there are many episodes like that you could
I'm sure.
talk
Much more
about
intelligent
and listen
people.
to all the sides. We're talking about travel and tourism and what it's like when you fly into Tel Aviv airport and have a trip around Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Haifa and all that great places. How about the ethnicities?
Yeah, it makes sense, but Israel is comprised of 74% Jewish population. The other 20% is from Arab population, and then the rest is just a hodgepodge of peoples.
The main language is Hebrew. However, you'll find English widely spoken, as well as Arabic. I think the majority of Westerners who visit there probably have extremely little Hebrew.
Yeah, I think like even probably more like Yiddish and like the older generations too. But almost everyone that we talked to spoke pretty good English.
Yeah. Yiddish is a mixture of Hebrew with European languages like I think German and French, maybe some Italian. I'm not quite sure, but it had to do when the Jews fled all over Europe and they mixed Hebrew with the European languages and they developed Yiddish.
Yeah, exactly.
Fun fact, Fiddler on the Roof came to Broadway in New York and did the whole show in Yiddish.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I would not understand a word.
Yeah, it'd be awkward, but okay.
We have a note about religion on this episode. There's going to be plenty of references to the Bible. How could there not be? This is Israel after all. But we believe this episode's going to be helpful to you in traveling to Israel, whether or not you believe in the Bible.
Absolutely.
Let's introduce our trips because we have a couple to talk about.
Yeah. How about you go first because you've been twice.
So in 2017, I had my first trip to Israel. I went in February. It was a shorter trip, mostly comprised of travel agents. There was the Mediterranean Expo that we visited, which was taking place in Tel Aviv, see Jerusalem as well. And that was with a small group of people.
Sure. Okay. And then, in December 2018, we both went together, part of our church group, a large group. So it was definitely different. And we're going to talk about what it's like to travel with a large group as opposed to traveling on your own accord. But we were there for 10 days and saw the northern part and the southern part of the country.
And in December, we were there during Hanukkah.
Exactly.
So we have some stories about that.
Yeah.
But let's kick this show off with our defining words.
Here's 3 words to help you. Here's our defining
So our first defining word is religious. From the moment you arrive, if you're not ready for this, if you've not been much experience with Jewish culture, it is going to smack you square in the face. You're going to see yarmulkes, you're going to see mezuzahs, you're going to see Hasidic Jews, Orthodox Jews, synagogues, and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, and I would even argue that even before you land in Israel, you are probably going to be hit with Jewish culture because you're going to be seeing so many native Israelis going to the flights. You'll see ultra-Orthodox Jews. You'll see them doing their prayers, and you might even sit next to a rabbi who's going to be telling you stories about his time in New York and his life in Israel, and it's very interesting. You are going to get really ingrained with that culture.
And Will, such a key part of the religious culture is kosher.
Yeah.
And you're even going to see that on the airplane itself when you go over, because if you're on the Israeli airline El Al airline, then you're going to notice that they're not going to serve you meat and cheese together.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but it's interesting. It's very interesting. Our second defining word is, we didn't really know how to exactly coin this, but we're calling it safe dangerous. And what we mean by that is that it's a safe country in that almost every citizen of Israel has been a part of the IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Force, their military. And you will see many people walking around dressed in military garb, carrying AR-15s and the like, and they're there to protect people from any possible terrorist attacks. And I'm sure you've heard it in the news, but Israel does get bomb threats every day. In fact, there's an app called Red Alert. You can download it before you go to Israel, and it'll give you a notification if there's a bomb or a rocket being launched at Israel. And for the most part, you're probably not going to be affected by this unless you are near the Gaza Strip or parts of the West Bank. But more from what I've heard, from what we talked to other people in Israel, is really just those around the Gaza Strip area. So know that's there. That's a realistic and actual thing that happens to Israeli citizens that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. But as tourists, if you're going to Tel Aviv, if you're going to Eilat, and you're going to Jerusalem and Tiberias, you're probably not going to have to worry about these things, but keep that in mind. You're going to see a lot of military personnel, and that's just there to keep people safe.
My first trip to Israel, I went down for breakfast the one morning in Jerusalem, and our tour guide had the newspaper open, and he said, "Oh, looks like we got bombed last night." I was like, what?
Yeah.
He said, "Yeah, I guess 4 bombs came in, sent by Hamas in the Gaza Strip area." And I was like, what happened? The Iron Dome got 3 of them, and then 1 they just let land in a field because it wasn't going to hurt anyone.
Yeah, and for those unfamiliar, the Iron Dome is this defense system that the Israeli government has. It shoots basically rockets that destroy the incoming missiles so that they do not affect the Israeli population. So it's a sense of protection. But I do remember we were on the tour bus, and we were talking to Benny, who was our tour guide, and he got a notification on his phone, and he's like, "Oh yeah, there's a rocket incoming." And we're like, "What? Where? Do we need to like hide or something?" And he's like, "Oh no, it's far away. It's not going to hit us."
The fact that children can be just off on their own in the streets, totally unharmed, completely safe.
Yeah.
Yet sometimes they have to run and go into a bomb shelter. It's like paradoxical.
Yeah. Just to reiterate, we've been there twice, and we've never been affected by any of these rockets.
And that's the biggest question I get. I want to go to Israel, but is it safe? And I don't want to go until it's safe. Okay, listen up. You're never going to go to Israel with that attitude.
Yeah.
You got to go.
Yeah.
There might be a bomb, but hey, we've had 4.5 million tourists a year, and they're fine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Maybe something's happened to one of those tourists. I honestly don't know, but
Sure.
It's safe, so go.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anyone getting hurt going to Israel.
No. Last defining word, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. This is such an epic city. I would say it's my favorite city in the world. Will, how do you even go about trying to describe a city like Jerusalem?
It's so difficult because it's so important to so many religions. Mm-hmm. It's so ingrained with such history and such culture.
You're walking on ancient ground.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, it's not handicap accessible. You're walking on like these rocks that are like these like stone. I don't know. What's that type of ground
Like
you're walking on.
cobblestone?
Yeah, but like each one, different heights of each one, so be careful. But it's just glorious and wow.
It's magnificent. It's so spectacular. It's nothing like I've ever, and
I've heard people say this, and I was always a naysayer, but this idea of, when you're in Jerusalem, you just feel something. I'm like, what are you talking about? Don't say that. Doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
And then I went there and I experienced it. I was like, darn it. Now I'm one of those guys who says that, but I don't know how to articulate it.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. It's so cool. It's such an experience. If you're religious, you're really going to love it and enjoy it. If you're not, you're really going to love it and enjoy it. It's so cool, and I don't think you can really miss this city. It's truly one of the best that I've been to.
Let's just take a minute from a biblical perspective and talk about this with the three religions. So for the Jews, right there in the middle of the Temple Mount is Mount Moriah, the believed spot where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac until an angel stopped him. Extremely important area. For the Muslims, this is the believed spot where Muhammad ascended. So it's a very sacred spot for the Muslims. And then for the Christians, right here on the Temple Mount is where Jesus was falsely accused by many and then carried his cross there shortly just a ways away to Golgotha, the Mount of the Skull, where he was crucified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can go there today and see the believed spot. We'll talk about this whole believed spot thing of his tomb and where he was prepared for burial.
Yeah.
Wow, talk about a contested land.
Yeah, it puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
It really does.
There's 4 quarters in Old Town Jerusalem: the Jewish quarter, the Arab quarter, the Christian quarter, and the Armenian quarter.
Yeah, and I think 3 of those 4 are pretty self-explanatory, but
Right.
Can you explain the Armenian quarter?
I heard that the Armenians helped build it.
Yeah, I think that's right. They're closely ingrained with the Christian quarter, but they have their own sort of history.
Let's move on to our highs and lows.
Sometimes things are good, sometimes they're bad too. It's highs, lows coming to you.
So for those of you who have read the Bible or haven't, visiting Israel adds another dimension to the Bible. So me, growing up, hearing about the Bible and reading the Bible, I can tell you I have heard things all my life. This concept that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. He then fled to Egypt, and when he came back, he lived in Nazareth. From Nazareth, when he started his ministry, he went to Galilee, specifically in a land called Capernaum. And then in Capernaum, he walked on water in the Sea of Galilee. He fell asleep on the boat there in the Sea of Galilee. Then he taught on the mountain, and he fed 5,000 and 4,000. And then he came down to Jerusalem, and he was baptized in the Jordan River. And when he got to Jerusalem, he was at the Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane. And then he was tried on the Temple Mount and then buried and crucified on Golgotha. And so maybe as someone who's grown up with the Bible, you've heard this again and again. And all those names I've just said are like ringing true in your ears. But being able to be there and to actually experience it, walk through it, taste, touch, smell, it changes everything. You will no longer read the Bible the same because now there's an extra dimension added. And let me tell you, folks, Google Photos is nice, Google is nice for like images and searching for these things, but it's just not the same as being there.
It's not, going back to that idea of putting things into perspective, but going to Israel puts the Bible into perspective a lot more. And it makes you feel like you can actually, when you go and read the Bible after going to Israel, you can place yourself in those scenes now, and you can visualize it a lot better, and everything comes to a reality a lot easier. And it's so cool. And we're going to touch a little bit upon what it looked like to follow the life of Jesus by going to Israel. But it's so interesting, and I don't think I would do a trip to Israel in any other way as a believer. And it's just it's amazing. Yeah. Our next high is actually the Wailing Wall, which is a part of, so it's probably the holiest site in Judaism, right? It's this wall where believers go to pray. And you've probably seen pictures of this wall. Jews go and they have papers. They put their prayers on these papers. They stuff it in the wall. They do their prayers. It's interesting enough, segregated men and women's side, but don't let that deter you from going. It's very unique, very cool. And it's so holy because it's the remnants, the last remaining remnants of the temple. And so, yeah, it gives the Jews this ability to get close to God, and the only place on earth that God once lived on earth.
So the Wailing Wall is also called, you'll hear it referenced as the Western Wall, or in Hebrew, the Kotel. Here, men are required to have a head covering or a kippah, and if you don't have a yarmulke, all the same word. If you don't have a yarmulke, they will loan you one, which it's in a bin, so you borrow it and then put it back. So if you're worried about germs, buy your own. They're pretty cheap. But being able to go up to the Wailing Wall, you'll see many people praying nearby it. You'll see a lot of people putting their hands and even their forehead on it. And just Will said, you can write a prayer on a piece of paper, roll it up, and stick it in the wall itself. I do hear that they get so many that eventually they have to take them out and throw them away.
Yeah. And one thing to note about Israel is that there's a dress code for almost all of these sites that you go to. You are going to want to wear pants to be respectful and like nicer sandals, not like flip-flops, but how do you explain these sandals? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Dress sandals.
Yeah, dress sandals is, perfect. I don't wear sandals very often, but I highly recommend it if you're going to Israel because, you want to not necessarily dress up, but you want to dress respectfully for the location. And the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, is one of those locations. One of the cool things about the Wailing Wall that we got to do is we did a tour, and you wouldn't normally think this of the Wailing Wall because on the outside, it's just a wall.
Sure.
But the interesting thing about Jerusalem, and I did not notice this actually like on our way into Jerusalem, is that Jerusalem is a city on a mountain, not on a hill. It's on a mountain.
Right.
And it doesn't look like when you go into this tour for the Wailing Wall, you are actually going down hundreds of feet and you're seeing the foundations of this wall.
Right.
And it puts everything into perspective as to how old this city is and how many civilizations have built on top of this ground. And we're talking thousands of years of different civilizations building on this one location, and the wall has been there the entire time, and people, you're getting layers and layers of history.
This is a tour you do need an advance reservation for. It's called the Western Wall Tunnel Tour. Highly recommend it. You go in small groups of about 10 or 12 per group.
Yeah, really cool. I remember our first night in Jerusalem, we got into Jerusalem, and it was like 9 o'clock at night or something. And this is actually going to touch up on our low a little bit. So I'm gonna jump in a little early on talking about our lows, but it's all going to mesh together. One of our lows was actually that we got a hotel outside of downtown Jerusalem, but we had this tram. So here it plays into the high and the low. For me, it was a high because it offered a unique experience in that we took a tram and we were ingrained more so in the Israeli population. We were talking to just your local Israeli, but the downside of it was the only way we could get into downtown Jerusalem, the old city, was by this tram. So we were really dependent on this.
Yeah.
But what wraps into the high for me is our first night in Jerusalem, we got the idea to jump on these trams and take it into the old city because we're so excited to go into the old city. We've been reading about the old city of Jerusalem for our entire lives.
Sure.
There's so many stories are coming from this epicenter of culture. And I remember we got into the old city and it was just like, I don't know, it was just such a unique experience that I've never, ever had. And I don't think I ever will. And seeing all of these beautiful, intricate pieces of history and spiritual significance.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time we walked around the corner to see the Wailing Wall, and it just hit me like how real and how cool all this is. So I tell that story to put things into perspective a little bit of like how important and how cool the Wailing Wall is and just the old city of Jerusalem as a whole. And I guess we haven't really explained this, but there's like modern day Jerusalem and then there's the old city of Jerusalem. All the holy sites are in the old city of Jerusalem, which makes sense. So there's a modern day Jerusalem, but there's also the old city of Jerusalem.
Next high is swimming at the Dead Sea. There's two major bodies of water in Israel. Up north is the Sea of Galilee, and down south is the Dead Sea. And yes, the up north is where the rain comes, and it falls into the Sea of Galilee, and then it runs down the Jordan River and ends up in the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is full of salt, so much salt that no animals can live in it, so you won't find any fish or wildlife in the sea, in the Dead Sea. But what makes this sea so special is that you can float in it. And if you've never been able to float like me because you're stick thin, you can actually float for a change.
Yeah, you have to try to not float.
Exactly. Here's the best way I can explain it. When you lie on your back in the Dead Sea, it's as if someone's underneath you, pushing you up to the sky, right up. And so you're like, whoa, who's pushing me? But it's just the salt elevating you. And it's a super exciting feeling. But a couple quick just things you need to know about the Salt Sea, the Dead Sea. I guess we'd call it the Salt Sea. Probably is called the Salt Sea. Okay, a couple key things. Number one, you need to have a towel and fresh water ready at the shore very closely, because the moment this water gets in your eye or your mouth, or you have it on your hand and with your hand you touch your eye or mouth, you are miserable. You can't get comfortable again. You will be a wreck, and you're going to get out of the water to try to find fresh water to flush out your eyes or mouth.
Yeah.
Which is why I recommend doing the Dead Sea at a place that actually has facilities. There's hotels that offer it. There's also various spots that offer it. If you just find a portion of the Dead Sea in your drive, let's just stop here and go in. I don't recommend it because there's no place to shower off afterwards. And this water, it does feel a bit slimy, but people come from all over the world and they pay top dollar for this mud that this salty water creates, because there's believed to be healing properties.
Yeah, it's very medicinal.
We saw people rubbing it all over their bodies, and they're like head to toe, they're covered in mud from the Dead Sea.
Oh, it's so fun.
Yeah, exactly. I think at a point we all probably put some on our heads and foreheads and things like that.
Covered myself.
And then you can buy it and bring it home with you, and it makes great gifts. Hey, here is mud from the Dead Sea you can cover yourself with.
Yeah, and a few things to note. I wouldn't recommend shaving like in advance at all. Like any little nick, even if you don't see it, you're going to feel it, and it burns very badly. It's crazy how much it burns.
You will know if there's a cut on your body.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah. And also, I don't know, I guess I recommend wearing like some sort of water shoe or something.
Yeah.
Like we thought we were being real smart, like going off the beaten path and just like jumping in the water as quick as we can. And the ground was so sharp. Like my feet got cut up.
Ooh.
And so it was like extra painful.
Oh gosh.
So either wear shoes, like some sort of water shoes to protect the soles of your feet.
Yeah.
Or don't go off the beaten path. Again, stick to that designated area where people are congregating for this location. But it's so cool. I remember talking to Benny, again, travel guide. He said that more often than not, if you go to the doctor and you say, hey, I'm having problems with my skin, or I'm having trouble breathing or something like that, the first thing they'll say is like, go spend a weekend at the Dead Sea, relax, breathe in that air, and then come back and see me and see if you still need some help.
Oh my goodness.
And a lot of the times it helps.
I didn't tell you, but the first time I went to Israel, we got a day pass for the Ramada Inn, which was at the Dead Sea.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, you go into the locker room, you change into your bathing suit, and then you go out. And it was February, so it was freezing. But we did it, and that's one quick piece of encouragement. Do the Dead Sea, no matter how cold it is, get in it. If you're going in June or July, it's going to be warmer.
Scorching.
Yeah, for sure. But if you're there in January, February, just make the plunge and do it. But one really cool thing was that inside the Ramada Inn, they had a pool area that they pumped super hot, maybe like 98, 99 degrees, like hot tub level, but it was a big pool, and they brought the Dead Sea water in. So it was the Dead Sea experience, but hot tub feeling.
Interesting.
Inside.
That's super cool.
So from there, then you showered off and you changed in the locker room, and you were good. So
I want to do that next time.
That was a really cool experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. If you're into spas and everything, this is definitely the spot to go to. Lots of spas, different things to see.
Take the last high.
All right, sure. Yes, it was just super cool for me. We did hookah near the old city. Technically, I think it is the old city, but it's in a spot called Mahan Yehuda Market. I think that's how you pronounce it. And what's really cool about this market is there's a bunch of local vendors. You're talking fresh fruits, meats, different restaurants, different cafes. They have so much like cool artistic graffiti all over the shops and stuff. So even when the shops are closed, you get to see all these really cool pieces of art. But what was really cool for me was just like the whole ambiance of the whole atmosphere, just being ingrained with, I guess, more like on the Arab culture side of things, because hookah is so ingrained in the Arab communities and the Islamic communities.
But even then, at the table next to us, there's Jewish guys with kippahs and tzitzit tassels, and they're smoking hookah too. So I mean, it felt very communal.
Yeah, it was super cool. And we just went to a mini craft brewery, and then got some beers, and then walked on over, got some hookah, and it was a really cool experience. Highly recommended it.
I highly enjoyed the street art, as I always do.
Yeah.
Got my pictures. We got a couple lows. We owe it to our audience to have some lows to tell them what to watch out for. So you already mentioned this a little bit, so why don't you take our first low?
Sure, yeah. Like I mentioned, I don't know if you would say we made the mistake of, but we had a hotel outside the old city of Jerusalem. So every time we wanted to go and do anything in the old city, which is most of the tourism is in the old city, we'd have to take the tram, or we were really reliant on our bus. And the traffic around the old city is definitely the worst traffic in the country. And at times, especially if you're going during a holiday like Hanukkah, the traffic can be really intense because everyone's rushing home, trying to get home, get ready for the festivities. So there were times where like we had maybe a mile like drive, and it took 2 hours, something like that, to get back to our hotel, like to have dinner and get ready for the night and whatever we wanted to do. But my recommendation is to try and find a hotel or somewhere to stay within the old city. It makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. I like that. Yeah, and one other low is just that security is very high. It has to be. The IDF has to be on their game. The Iron Dome has to be ready to intercept missiles, and they have to be very careful with who enters Israel. So this starts even when you're like in New York flying over. A little story here is you go through TSA whenever you get on a flight, and we're all used to that. And if you're over 75 years old, you don't have to take your shoes off to go through TSA. Congratulations to all of you over 75. When you're going into JFK Terminal 4, the international airport, and you go to get on your flight to Tel Aviv, and I assume this also happens in Newark, which also has flights to Tel Aviv, as well as the other cities in the U.S. that does, you have to go through a second security check to get on the plane. Actually, did we have to do that when we went? I'm just trying to think.
I remember on our way back from Tel Aviv, going back to New York, it took, like an hour and a half to board the flight or something, because they went through each person carry-on bag, and everyone had a carry-on bag.
Right.
So we're talking, I don't know, a jumbo jet full of people, and they're going through all the luggage. Yeah. And it took a long time. But the plus side of that is once we arrived in America, we didn't have to go through TSA or anything like that. It was just get our luggage and go.
Right.
So
I guess they figure if you're coming from Israel, you've already been checked pretty well. So I can't say this is true for every single flight to Israel. I just know that in my experience, I had to go through TSA twice, and they made those over 75 take off their shoes. And they were arguing like, no, I'm over 75. I don't have to. They're like, nope, this is Israel. This is a different animal. You're going to take off your shoes. And then while we were in airspace getting close to Israel, the pilot said, okay, everyone sit down and hold still for 10 minutes because Israel's going to examine our plane from the ground. Or was it another jet flying nearby? I don't know what it was. But what did they use to examine us? And it was like, no one can go to the bathroom and no one can stand up. You gotta hold still, watch the movie you're watching on the TV, because our plane's going to be examined to make sure we're okay to have approval to land. Yeah,
but all that said, you feel very safe. All that security, it does come with some perks, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah. I think that concludes our lows. Do you have anything else?
No, just get to the airport nice and early, because it's not going to be quick.
It's not going to be quick, no. Yeah. All right, let's talk about our tips.
Absolutely.
Tips from the travel agents.
Our first tip is to check out this area called Masada, and it's really cool because it's a location of huge historical significance. In AD 70, the Roman legions came into Israel, and they were hunting down the last of these Jewish rebels. And these Jewish rebels kind of held up. I don't know if the term's hold up or held up, but they were staying in this huge sort of like desert plateau almost. And in modern days, you have to take a cable car to get to this. But they were holed up here, and in 70 AD, the Romans came in and they attacked these Jewish rebels, and the Romans eventually won. But what's so cool about Masada is that it offers this huge aerial viewpoint of the area of the Dead Sea and the surrounding areas of the Dead Sea and Roman baths. And it does have one of King Herod's temples. So this huge ornate palace is there. Well, not ornate, but huge historical palace is there. And it's super cool. I don't know, like you can either hike it, and that's a really interesting situation. I wish we would have done that. It would have been a lot longer, and we probably wouldn't have been able to do it.
Right.
But it would have been really cool. Or you can take a cable car, and from the ground, you can just see this super cool view of the Dead Sea. It's amazing.
Yeah, and if you're knowledgeable of the Bible, I'm gonna guess you haven't heard of Masada, and you're thinking, what on earth are these guys talking about? Because Masada is not referenced in the Bible. It was a castle complex built by Herod the Great, who ruled from 37 to 4 BC. And just as Will said, yeah, when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in AD 70, Jews fled there. And then it's actually a very crazy story, very sad. We won't get into it. But there is a movie that was filmed in 1981 called Masada, which you can watch, which will definitely prepare you for this pretty epic experience. But I'm actually going to say I enjoyed the cable car to the top.
No, it was super cool. It was really cool. I just really wish we could have had the
hike.
perspective of hiking it, because I like hiking.
There's just no shade there, though. You are going to get blasted by the sun.
Yeah, and you're talking about the hottest area in Israel.
Right.
And yeah, it probably would have been miserable at times, but I just wanted the unique perspective of doing the hike.
One of my clients' sons had his bar mitzvah up there.
Really?
Wouldn't that be pretty cool?
That's a pretty intense bar mitzvah.
You better be on his game ready to read that Hebrew and deliver that speech. Huh?
Yeah. But what do you think? You're in the area. Should you go to Masada first? Should you go to the Dead Sea first? Should you do them separately?
You're going to get super hot in Masada, so I think you should do that first, and then you should relax in the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
But you need to do the Dead Sea when you're doing Masada because they are together.
Yeah, and if you're interested in history, or if you're interested in biblical history, another nearby location is the location where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Mm-hmm. And if you go with a tour guide, you might get to see the remnants of this old, I don't know, I guess they're a really interesting sect of Christianity or Judaism, I don't know, but they had this commune or something, and that's where the Dead Sea Scrolls were held.
Right. Yeah, I was just reading up on that, how they found them. Was it in the 50s they were found?
Yeah, I think it was...
Just by like a shepherd or something?
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty interesting, though. I highly recommend checking out the areas just to take a look. It's pretty cool.
1946 or 47 through 1956, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found.
Yeah.
In Qumran Caves. And in Qumran now, there's actually a lot of gift shops. Great place for souvenirs.
Yeah, lots of gift shops. That's for sure.
All right, let's talk about money.
Let's talk about money. Yeah. The currency in Israel is shekels.
Which almost sounds like a joke.
Right. It's a fun word to say. Shekel.
Yeah. Like we're talking about some ancient currency that's like, oh yeah, how many shekels are you to be like? No, it is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly it.
But yeah, they're not coins. They are dollar. They're paper money. So if you go to the airport, when you arrive, just go to the ATM, get some shekels. You're going to need it. The US dollar is not accepted there. So you're going to need those shekels.
And at the time of recording of this podcast, $1 US is right around 3.24 shekels. Also referred to as Israeli new shekel, and the code is ILS. So the US dollar is USD. The Israel money is ILS. I'm just saying that because you're going to see that.
Yeah.
However, a lot of places take credit card. I would say most places.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a location that we went to that didn't have credit card, I don't think.
It's just so nice to be able to tip and pay for some small purchases in cash.
Yeah, maybe some of the markets in the old city.
That's a good point. But even like our tram tickets and things like that all took credit card.
Yeah, that was really nice.
Israel's very advanced technologically.
Yeah, they are.
You're going to notice on the drive from the airport to wherever you're going, let's say Galilee, that you're going to notice Apple's headquarters, Microsoft headquarters, and other big tech companies.
Yeah, they have this area, they call it the Wadi Valley, a play on Silicon Valley, and it's where all these tech startups are hanging out, similar to America's Silicon Valley. So yeah, there are a lot of investors with Apple and Microsoft and all those big tech companies. It's really cool, really interesting.
Speaking of money, you're going to want to buy souvenirs, and specifically in downtown or Old Town Jerusalem and in other areas, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to buy things to bring home. So let's talk about bartering. The first biggest difference is there are Jewish sellers of goods and Arab sellers of goods. And so this gets a little bit difficult because it's two vastly different cultures that you're trying to interact with to purchase their items at the least expensive price. And leave it to your tour guide to say, hey, this whole area here is all going to be maybe Arab or Muslim. I shouldn't say Muslim because there are some Arab Christians as well, but we'll just say Arab. These are all Arab salespeople, so you should interact in this way when bartering with them. Or, hey, this area here is going to be mostly Jewish sellers, so you should probably interact this way to get the best price. And so I'm not going to pretend like I know. I'm just going to say oftentimes when you're trying to buy something, maybe specifically from an Arab seller, I think you should offer, when they tell you the price, a good rule of thumb is to try to offer like maybe 1/4 of that price and try to get it around that.
Yeah.
But they know you're a tourist, so you probably pay a little bit more than exactly 25%.
Yeah.
But I'm sure many people in Israel who are listening to this are going to have vastly different ideas than what I've just told you. But I'm just going to say that bartering is something you do when buying things off the street, things like that. But there are areas that you would not barter, like you would not haggle at a, how do I say it, like shopping mall, restaurant, fashion, like a large chain store, supermarket, public transportation, kiosks, places like that. It would just look weird if you tried to haggle.
Yeah.
But when there's 30 different vendors lined up at the street with their little booths, like their little markets behind them, all selling like similar stuff, Passover plates and wine cups and things like that, and mezuzahs and yarmulkes. Yeah, probably go 10 or 25% of what they tell you the price is and see how good you can do.
Yeah.
I'm such a bad barterer.
I don't think I've ever done it. I don't think I've ever bartered.
Yeah, my brother was really good. I once totally screwed him over. He was in the middle of getting something for dirt cheap, and I came in and finally just said, Nick, here, I'll just give you some money and you can buy it. And the guy was like, see, your brother will give you the money. Great, do it. Nick was like, what'd you do? I was like, oh, I'm not good at this.
You messed it up, man.
When to travel to Israel, when not to? Give us the rundown.
Sure. So, all right, Israel, like we said, is a very religious country. Between all of the religions, there's going to be a lot of holy days, and specifically because it's a Jewish country, they're going to observe the Jewish holidays a lot more, I guess. So there are towns that are just entirely Jewish. There are towns that are entirely Muslim and Arabic. But one thing to note is that if you go during one of the holy days, it's similar to going to Europe during a bank holiday. Everything's going to be closed, from the public transportation to the mom and pop shops, to the subways and the McDonald's. They're going to be closed. Keep that in mind. If that's going to happen during the time you're there, maybe go to a resort or something. Just keep it in mind.
So it's just the concept of coming to America right before Christmas would be quite exciting for a tourist.
Yeah.
There's the music, everything is decorated, and the lights, how beautiful. But on Christmas Day itself, it's going to be pretty boring for you. And similarly, I think the same holds true with Israel.
Yeah.
Leading up to it would be exciting. Now, we were there during Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Which isn't it's not a Moedim. It's not a holy day, technically.
Right.
It's a holiday, but not a holy day, maybe. And I don't know if maybe a Jewish person would contest me with that. But
sure,
things were open and we had a great time.
It's more like a 7-day party.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it was really
highly
cool.
Recommend going during Hanukkah.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about itineraries. If you want to follow an itinerary that follows the life of Christ, you should start your trip up north in Galilee and you work your way south and finish in Jerusalem. This is the way, it's just like I said earlier, Christ started his ministry there in Galilee, in Capernaum, and then traveled south to Jerusalem. And I think that's a pretty cool way to do this trip.
Yeah.
It also works logistically pretty well.
It does.
When you arrive in Israel, it is going to be about a 2-hour drive north to Galilee, but it's an exciting drive and you learn a lot on that.
Yeah.
So starting there, coming south to Jerusalem, and then you're going to have a late night flight home from Jerusalem back to the States because they all leave at 11 p.m. or midnight. So you're going to enjoy that last day in Jerusalem to buy all those souvenirs that last day and then go right to the airport. So you're not lugging it around the whole trip.
Yeah, it's a really cool. If you're a believer, you might want to jump straight to Jerusalem because of the significance of it. But I highly recommend, taking the time to go up to Galilee and really following the steps of Christ. It just puts things into perspective a lot more, and it really helps the story of the Bible come into fruition a lot easier for you because, you actually get to see the things that you read about. It's incredible. It's super cool.
Will, for Bible and non-Bible readers alike, we're hearing about these different things that you need to do, like Dome of the Rock, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Western Wall. What is all this, and how are you defining them?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the Dome of the Rock is that sort of like that gold dome mosque that you might have seen pictures of. So that's in control of the Muslims. So that area is Islamic, and if you're not a believer in Islam, you are not going to be able to enter that mosque. Right. You can walk around the outside area, I believe. Yeah. However,
they let me up onto the Temple Mount, but not every day will they let you do that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting location. Not trying to get into politics or religion or anything like that, but yeah, there's been a few problems here and there. So just watch out, be mindful of what's happening that day. You might be able to go up in that area. You might not be able to. Just play it safe.
It might be Monday, you're allowed to go on the Temple Mount. Tuesday, you're not. It's just like that. They keep you guessing. And if it's one of those days where you're lucky enough to get to go on top of the Temple Mount, then ladies, you must be covered up. No bare shoulders, no cleavage, no short shorts. They will correct you. And I was there where a guard corrected a woman for having too low cut of a shirt. It's pretty intense. And,
And then for Christians, there's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the location that Christ was crucified and laid down afterwards. And
the tomb is there as well.
Yeah, and the tomb is there.
There's going to be a long line for that.
There's going to be a huge line for that. Yeah,
it is a Catholic church now.
It is Catholic. It's very interesting. I recommend popping your head in, taking the time to see it. It's interesting. It's a huge, cultural landmark. Take the time to see it. Here's an interesting story. You might see this ladder that's like just sitting outside of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the interesting story behind that is the church is actually owned by an Armenian side and a Catholic side. And for them to do any sort of change, they both have to come together in this council and have a total agreement. But they're always arguing, always having disagreements. And so they had some Armenian monk or something put this ladder up on the outside of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 1820 or something like that. And the Christian side was like, hey, what are you doing? We never okayed this ladder. And so they've been in an argument about this specific ladder since the 1800s, and it's still out there today. So you can go and you'll see this ladder, and it's a testament to not only the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the disagreements that's going on with that, but I would say even like Israel proper. It's a very interesting symbol. And then last but not least, the last landmark of religious importance is the Wailing Wall, like we mentioned. That's very important to the Jewish belief and the Christian belief, but predominantly the Jewish belief. And the thing to note, like we said, you're going to need to dress respectfully. You're going to need a head covering. You'll probably have to wash your hands out in the area. And it's a segregated area. So if you're with your wife, your girlfriend, your sisters, whatever, keep that in mind. You will have to split apart and then come back together after you're done checking out the area.
Just a quick note, because I think I forgot to touch on it, but what makes the Western Wall such a big deal is that when the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, was on the Temple Mount, it was on the west side of the wall. So being at the western side of the wall, you're at the closest point to where God existed on earth in the Ark of the Covenant, in the Holy of Holies.
Yeah. Exactly. And one other thing to note about Israel is that the climate actually can change pretty drastically. Like we said, it's a very small country, but if you're going up to Tiberias and the Sea of Galilee, it's going to be a lot warmer than it is in Jerusalem. And if you're going south, it's again going to be a lot warmer than it is in Jerusalem. It might be 85 degrees in Tiberias. It could be high 40s, low 50s in Jerusalem, depending on the day. Right. So there's quite the difference in temperature. And we were talking, an hour and a half, 2-hour drive difference. It's a pretty substantial temperature change. And yeah, they have different, you might be in a desert one minute, and then 10 minutes later, you might be in an area that's like alpine.
Kind of lush. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And there are a lot of fruits that are hanging out on trees. You might see pomegranates that you can just pull off, different citrus trees. Yeah. Olives are the big one.
Ooh, we got to tell them how we try to olive. Keep going.
So if you didn't know, olives are brined before you actually eat them, as you know.
I did not know.
I did not know this either. I just had the thought that, you'd be able to go up to this olive tree and just eat it. It's going to taste amazing.
How cool to eat an olive straight from an olive tree.
It's not good. It's not good.
I always get this question, Brian, in all your travels, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? And I'm my same story every time I ate a fisheye in China. But that's it. Everyone's expecting me to say something crazy.
Yeah.
What I need to start saying is an olive right off an olive tree. It was disgusting.
Yeah.
Maybe the worst thing I've ever had.
It was interesting.
So hard to get down.
Keep that in mind. If you didn't know, olives are brined, and they taste
I
not
love
good.
Olives.
I do too. I love them. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how bad.
So different fruits, they have date trees, everything. So that's really cool.
So we've talked about Jerusalem and we've talked about Galilee. Other cities are Tel Aviv. So Tel Aviv is going to be your very hustle and bustle, New York City type city. Skyscrapers, art galleries, a lot of people who would not look religiously Jewish because they're not. You're going to see it's a beach city. It's a gorgeous, it's right on the Mediterranean with gorgeous sunsets, delicious food. You're in the Mediterranean, so the greenest of green cucumbers, the reddest of red tomatoes, that fresh grilled chicken, lots of feta cheese. Oh my gosh, it's delicious. Plenty of pita, hummus, falafel, all that kind of stuff. But while you're there, we're talking about the city. So Tel Aviv, hustle and bustle, lots to see and do, lots of shopping. You're not really going to feel the religious side of Israel much in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, and there's another similar city that's in the area. It might actually be hyphenated Tel Aviv as well. It's called Jaffa, so you might see it as Jaffa hyphen Tel Aviv. It's a neighborhood in the surrounding area of Tel Aviv, but it's also commonly known as its own entity. And it is more so, again, that beachfront city, but it's a coastal city and on a cliff. And it's really awesome. It's really cool. You'll get a beautiful panoramic view of Tel Aviv and a beautiful panoramic of the Mediterranean. And I recommend going there. There's a few religious significant areas.
In the book of Acts, chapter 10 or 11 was Cornelius's house, which is there.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a little bit of stuff like that. So
it's charming and it's not as intense as Tel Aviv. Quick note on Jaffa is it's a city with 3 names because you're going to hear it. You're going to see it spelled 3 different ways, and it's not 3 different cities. It's the same. There's Jaffa, Jaffa. There's Joppa, Joppa, which if you're a Bible reader, it's where Jonah fled to Tarshish or Nineveh, whichever one. And also in Hebrew, you're going to see it as Yafo, Yafo. It's all the same city.
Yeah. And then there's another city called Eilat. That is a Red Sea resort city. So if you're interested in checking out the Red Sea and you want to hang out in a resort, I recommend Eilat. I heard very good things and it made me very jealous that we did not get to go. My second trip to Israel, I'm definitely doing a few nights in Eilat just to check it out. So yeah, Red Sea, cool little resort city. And then our last city that we wanted to talk about, and it's the only other city that we went to, it's called Caesarea, and it's off the Mediterranean. And again, a lot of religious importance here. Is also home to one of Herod's palaces, and you get to see the remnants of Herod's palace. And one cool thing that I thought this was pretty cool, but I guess in the ancient days, they would construct swimming pools, but the swimming pools would be constructed out into the ocean. So they would find a shallow area of the ocean, kind of in the rocks and stuff, and they would build into it and create a pool. And you can go out and you can see this pool, and some people might be out there, even though they're not supposed to, but some people do it. And I don't know, it's really cool. I didn't think about anything like that, like what a swimming pool would look like in ancient days. And they had them, and it's so cool.
You have to check out Caesarea, in Hebrew, Caesarea. Specifically, hold on, is there a difference between Caesarea Maritime and Caesarea Philippi?
I was thinking the same thing.
I think it's Maritime that we went to, which is by the coast, and that's also biblical significance. Also in the book of Acts, where Paul was in prison before being sent to Rome for trial.
Yes, and it is an area where there was gladiatorial fights. So you will see a gladiator arena, complete with the trap doors where they hid animals and stuff, and chariot track portions. Really cool.
And you get to stand in the middle of the amphitheater and speak real quietly, and everyone, the whole amphitheater can hear you.
Yeah.
And there's those old ancient public toilets where everyone pooped together. So it's a great picture.
Yeah. Highly recommend it. Very cool.
Yeah. A lot of great cities.
So
last tip.
Yeah. There's a few things that everyone asks when you go to a new location is,
right,
how is it to drive there?
And I don't want to be on a tour bus, Will, with 40 other people. I just want to do it myself.
Yeah, so we did take a tour bus. We were with a tour group, so we did not drive, and we never had the opportunity to rent a car. And to be honest, I would be a little nervous in a lot of the places.
I would be terrified.
Specifically Jerusalem, because again, Jerusalem's been around for thousands of years. So are the roads. The roads have been there for thousands of years, and there are roads that are as narrow as alleyways, and you'll be super impressed when your tour bus is able to fit through these. But if I had to do it in like the tiniest of cars, I would be nervous. And Jerusalem can be really crowded, and you have to throw that into account. And the highways and stuff, they look pretty self-explanatory. They didn't look too bad. Some of the areas didn't look too bad, but keep in mind that the driving at times can be a little hectic. So if you're going to rent a car, be very careful.
We sell rental car insurance at our agency, and it's just funny because the insurance company is very clear that there's these countries they don't cover. Hold on. Jamaica, Ireland, Iceland, India, and Israel.
I'm very curious as to why Iceland's on there, but
it has to do with the ash that gets kicked up under the body
coverage. Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't cover that, and that's a key part.
Interesting. All the other ones make sense.
Yeah. It's like, no,
Iceland.
It is funny. If you're here insuring a rental car, you're like, I don't want to insure people in Israel. How many dings are there going to be after you've been driving for 10 days? Oh my goodness. It's going to be crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah. So keep that in mind.
Quick little hotel tip. All the hotels I've gotten to visit in Israel, the King David Hotel in Jerusalem was by far the coolest. Great views of the city, beautiful hotel, super classy. I think it's where all the bigwigs go when they go to Israel.
I don't think we have any more tips. Do you have anything else? Go to Israel. Absolutely.
Let's get on to our final standby items.
It's safety and other info with standby items. Here we go.
So when you arrive in Israel, Will, can you just go anywhere? Is it all just totally open, like here in the U.S., where you can go from state to state and not even really realize you're crossing a border?
Yeah. All right. So this whole time we haven't mentioned the elephant that's in the room, and that's the little area of Palestine or the Palestinian territories, depending who you ask. And it's obviously significant to anyone that's trying to go to Israel. You can go to some of these areas, but exercise extreme caution depending on where you're going. The Gaza Strip specifically, exercise extreme caution. But the Palestinian areas of the West Bank has a very popular tourist destination, and that is Bethlehem, which is very significant in the story of Jesus Christ. And you can go there, but again, exercise caution. There is, depending on who you ask, a little bit of hostility in certain areas. But I know people who went to university there in Bethlehem and also went to university in Israel. Mm-hmm. And they enjoyed both experiences. And the area of Bethlehem that we went to was definitely different to the areas that we experienced in Israel. But the entire time I felt safe. I didn't feel like I was in danger. It was very cool to see a different part of the area. And so keep that in mind. It's not necessary that you can't go to these locations, but it's going to be a different governing body protecting these areas.
And to give you an example of what that kind of fleshes out to be, we had a Jewish tour guide with us, and when it came time to go into Bethlehem, he got off the bus, wished us farewell, and then once we crossed the checkpoint, an Arab,
Palestinian.
Christian, Palestinian, got on board to take us through Bethlehem. And
Exactly.
then transferred us back over to our Jewish tour guide when we got back into non-Palestinian run territory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But go check it out. I recommend it.
Is this really the site where blank happened? That's like, how can you not ask that question?
Yeah.
It seems like after you visit any site, I notice like the majority of people on the tour bus are on their phones looking at Google. Did this really happen here? You know?
Yeah.
Especially when you see something like a church that's based around a rock. And that rock is the supposed place where Jesus sweat blood before his being crucified. It's just kind of, how do we know that's the actual rock? I don't know the story of who it was who came around and said, this is this place, this is that place. I think it was, I'm not going to take a guess, but someone basically, I don't know if it's a tourist thing or what, or a way to make money or a way to build churches around it, but to say, this is the rock where Jesus sweat blood. This is the seashore where Jesus made breakfast for the disciples, and we should build a church here and all those kind of things. I think it gets risky to start putting all your faith, I won't make this too spiritual, but it gets risky to start putting faith and hope in a specific spot. There's probably a reason we don't know the exact spot where Jesus taught the Sermon on the Mount. We have an idea of probably where it was, but do we know exactly the exact location? I don't know. Some people will say it's definitely here, some people not. What are things we can tell are the place? I'd say the Temple Mount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even there's disagreement, but I would say, come on, it's the temple. Look at it. How on earth could this just be made up? This is where the temple was. As far as something like the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus walked on water. Hey, I'm not going to claim to know exactly which part of the water he walked on, but here's the Sea of Galilee. You're looking right at it. So that's where it happened, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of demons went into pigs and they ran off cliffs into the Sea of Galilee. Here's an area that have a bunch of cliffs up high on the Sea of Galilee. Chances are the pigs probably ran off around there. So I'm not the type to get really excited about a specific stone or a specific physical piece that you can see.
Yeah.
But hey, here is the Garden of Gethsemane, which is between the temple and the Mount of Olives. So yeah, this is definitely where Jesus met with his disciples. And they kept being able to stay awake.
You can expect that the locations haven't changed that much, that they're going to be the same locations that are talked about in the Bible and the Quran. But yeah, the specific details of, was Jesus actually crucified here it's a wishy-washy.
Because, and you're going to see a 1 to 2 hour line of people who are waiting to see the tomb where Jesus was laid at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are saying, no, it's actually more accurate. It was at the garden tomb. And then there's going to be that whole thing. It's okay. Are we worshiping the rock, the site, or
right? So
what happened?
When you go, keep that in mind, I guess, in the back of your mind. So if you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and you see a 2 hour long wait for this one spot, I would rest more on the side of it's probably not the exact location where Jesus was entombed. But hey, if you believe that, more power to you. Definitely not going to hold it against you. Just don't hold it against us when we're saying all these things. But one of the cool things about all of this is that there's always this constant sense of looking for history. Yeah. And so there's all these archaeological digs all around the old city of Jerusalem, and they're constantly finding new things.
Still finding things. How cool is that?
It's really cool. Whether you believe in the Bible or you're just interested in history as a whole, it's so cool.
So much to offer.
Yeah, and everyone's interested in it, so there's always something being discovered. So there's something there for everyone, I would say. Yeah.
We got to get people ready about eating kosher, because whether you care about being kosher or not, you're going to be eating kosher while you're in Israel. So hit them with the scoop.
Yeah, absolutely. If you like pork, you're not going to be having pork in Israel. It's just, you're not going to find it anywhere in the country. But one of the big things is that you're not going to have a cheeseburger, and you're probably never going to have meat and dairy at the same time. One of my favorite things to do when I go to a new country is to check out their McDonald's to see the differences between American McDonald's and ex-McDonald's. So we come to Israel, I got to check it out. I got to see what the difference is. Yeah. And one of the big things is that they don't have cheeseburgers at all. Nowhere on the menu. Okay, that's interesting. Let me get a milkshake with my burger. Yeah. Can't do it. Can't order a burger and a milkshake at the same time. You can order them separately, but you're never going to be able to do that. And Why is that, Brian?
In the book of Leviticus, I guess 3 times it says, do not boil a kid, a baby goat, in its mother's milk. And if you think about it, that it would be quite inhumane, right? Take a fresh baby goat, slaughter it, and then to boil it in its own mother's milk that was meant for life. Yeah,
Exactly.
You're using it for death. So it's crazy and cruel just to think about it. To make sure that commandment is never broken, the Jews believe, well, let's just never eat meat and cheese together. And then by no means are we breaking that commandment. So I believe I've heard a story that they have to wait 2 hours. Maybe it's different between different sects of Jews, but 2 hours between the time you eat meat and the time you eat cheese. So when you go to a restaurant, the first thing you're going to find out is this restaurant a meat restaurant or is it a dairy restaurant? If it's dairy, they're going to have, I think they're going to have eggs as well and cheese and yogurt and milk, all that stuff. And a meat restaurant, they're not going to have that. And a classic example I have was one morning I went down for breakfast in my hotel, and the hotel was a meat hotel restaurant in the breakfast.
Yeah.
And it was great. They had really good like beef whatever and turkey, I don't know, good like beef stuff. And then I got coffee and I asked for cream with my coffee. They said, no, we're sorry. We're not allowed to have cream here. We have some artificial powder cream that you can use, but which I don't like, but just interesting.
Yeah, so it's definitely different. So keep that in mind.
Also, no shellfish.
Yeah, no shellfish.
Ooh, except, so both Jews and Muslims don't eat pork. However, Muslims do eat shellfish. Jews do not eat shellfish.
Yeah.
So when you go into, like I noticed when we went into Bethlehem, on the menu, there were options for shrimp, which you wouldn't find in non-Palestinian areas.
Yeah, so if you go to, predominantly Arab neighborhood or town, you're going to probably be able to order shellfish. But for the most part, I wouldn't expect that. So keep that in mind. It's different.
So there's this idea between traveling in tour groups versus traveling on your own accord.
Yeah, honestly, I've always dragged my feet at the idea of being in a tour group.
Yeah.
Because I love to be able to dictate my own itinerary and go at my own pace because I like to go. And tour groups can hold you back because there's so many people of so many different ages. You might be 20 years old, but you might have someone that's 75 and is not going to be able to walk like 12 miles in one day. But one thing to know is that that's something that you will come across. But what really opened my eyes was how amazing going with a tour guide and a tour group can be. I thought Israel was amazing, but the experience was made so much better due to our guide and the knowledge that he had and the knowledge of history that he had to be able to share all the things that he talked about. So if you're going to Israel, I recommend going with a tour group. I wouldn't hesitate to do it. It's a great way to see the country for your first time.
Yeah.
You're going to see everything.
Yeah.
And not only are you going to see everything, you're going to learn things that you didn't even think about. And if you're interested in learning more about the Bible, there's a good chance you're going to learn a lot more about the Bible than you thought.
Well, when we were getting ready for this podcast, I kept pushing it off, this particular episode, because I felt the weight of it and all that we experienced was so great.
Yeah.
How could we do it justice? And I'm glad we're just doing it because, hey, we have to. And I hope we do more episodes on Israel. But I cringe at the thought of all that we've missed in this episode. And I can only think of how many people are going, but in my experience, we did these amazing things that you guys didn't even touch on. And so we barely scratched the surface of all there is to see and do in Israel. I want to just touch on a couple other things that would be good to do. There is Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Memorial. It's really sad, but I do think it's important to do it. And it's just, but maybe just a little tip, maybe do it towards the end of your trip because Yad Vashem is so difficult and
it's heavy
and very heavy and depressing that doing at the beginning of your trip might
dampen the mood.
It might dampen the mood for the rest of the trip. So maybe do it towards the end. And then the Temple Institute in Jerusalem is an institute that is showing you how they're getting ready for the rebuilding of the temple and all the pieces that will go inside the temple and the Holy of Holies and the inner room, all that stuff. They even have the golden menorah on display in the Jewish Quarter in downtown Old Town Jerusalem. That's in like triple, quadruple thick bulletproof glass, and you can go get your picture there. The thing is gigantic, and it's actually very cool to see up close. But Will, I know there's so much we didn't touch on, but I hope we at least scratch the surface to give people an idea of what it's like to travel to Israel. I would say definitely go for at least 8 days. I would say 10 days is pretty great, and it's worthy of 10 days. Book your trip. We're happy to help you. Would love to help you plan a trip to Israel. There's groups going. You can go by yourself. There's theory of a high-speed train going between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. So if you want to go by yourself, you're too nervous to drive, hey, it looks like there's ways we can make that happen. But plenty of taxis as well to get around. So you can do this trip. It is manageable. If you're a U.S. citizen, all you need is a U.S. passport. No visas needed. You can stay for up to 90 days. So let's make that trip to Israel happen. You know, one thing that makes this podcast unique from other travel podcasts is that we're actually travel agents and we work for a travel agency. My great-grandfather started a travel agency over 100 years ago, and we have the pleasure of working there now as travel agents. The travel agency is called Kima Travel. You can find us online at www.kima.travel. Kima spelled C-H-I-M-A. And the best part is that when you support Kima Travel by letting us book your trips, you're also supporting this podcast. So you get our great service as travel agents, and you're supporting your favorite travel podcast.
Absolutely. And if you're not interested in booking a trip right now, but you want to support the show, you can find us at buymeacoffee.com. And you can find our particular page in the description below. We are at buymeacoffee.com/thetravelagents.
Make sure to comment and subscribe before